Hi there, Taxa Mantis owners. Today in your 2020 Taxa Mantis, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install MB Sturgis's Quick Connect propane fitting. To assist us with this installation, we're also going to be using other hardware from MB Sturgis to tap into our existing propane system and get it routed over here behind the passenger side rear tire. And this is what our connector looks like when it's installed. This is going to allow us to connect Quick Connect propane accessories onto our system extremely quick and easy. We've mounted this on the outside of our trailer on the side, so that way when we get to our campsite and we're having a good time, we can go ahead and plug in any accessories that we have. It just simply pushes in, pull back on the collar, and then it locks it in place. So no longer do we have to have an extra propane tank that we carry with us for our outdoor accessories. We've got an easy connection right here on our trailer that we can plug into rather than lugging that tank out and having to screw into it. And this allows us to use the propane tanks that are installed at the front of our trailer. No longer are we bringing around extra stuff that we don't need. Being able to take that extra tank out of your trailer frees up room for more accessories, and it also sheds some of that weight because we know everybody out there wants to get as much possible, bring them with their campsite. We'll begin our installation by ensuring that we don't have any propane left in the lines. So you want to make sure you shut off both your tanks, and then you could disconnect a line down below to drain that out. And I recommend doing this outside, so that way it just dissipates into the air, and then you can bring your trailer inside to work on. We're going to be working on a Mantis today, but regardless of what you've got, you just need to make sure you've got the right length and size fittings for your propane system. You're just going to have to do your own research and see which ones you've had there. You can usually find it out by just looking at the size lines that you have. So now we're here at the back of our trailer on the passenger side. We're going to use a long bracket here where we attach it to one of the cross braces, and that's going to give us a mounting point for our Quick Connect fitting here so we can attach for our grill. I recommend figuring out where you want to put this Quick Connect fitting before going any further, because you need to know the length of hose that you need to route it here, and also that way you can determine any kind of fittings and things you're going to need to get it over to this location. So now we know where we're going to have it mounted, we can head over to where we're going to tap into our lines and get everything set up. So now that we had it mocked up, we know where we wanted to put it. I went ahead and removed our fitting, and I drilled out a couple of holes in the long bracket here, and I had already pre-drilled the hole where I wanted the Quick Connect fitting there. It was a 7/8 hole here, and I used 5/16 holes here. We're just going to mark these out so we know where we want it. And I do have just a slight bit of an angle to it to help angle it down to ensure we clear the lip here. So now I got the holes marked, we can go ahead and run self-tappers in. Due to the angle of the bracket, I find it easier if you run the self-tapper in first, then you can remove it and install it through the bracket. Now that we've got the holes made, I just removed them, put them through our bracket, and then we'll just run them down. We're now underneath our trailer, right at about the center on the driver's side. And all we did was we followed the propane line back where it comes from the tanks that we have mounted in the box at the front. So just so you can get an idea of where we are under the trailer, it's about midway on the driver's side. Right from the propane tanks there, they do go into a regulator, so that's going to ensure that this line here is already regulated. So if your device needs to be regulated for your grill, which most of them require some kind of regulation, whether on the grill or on your system here, you just want to pay attention to that. So we know that this point, this is after our regulator, so ours will be regulated. So now that we know where we're going to be tapping in, we're going to go ahead and get this line removed. We're just using a couple of adjustable wrenches to do this. It's a lot easier since a lot of these fittings can easily change size. Even if they are the same size thread pitch and everything on the inside, the outer size that your wrenches can change. So we're going to put one wrench on one side, one wrench on the other. You always want to hold your parts so that way they don't twist on you. Once you get it broke loose, this will just thread off of here. If we look at the ends of these, we can see that it's tapered here on the end, and so is our hose. So we need to make sure that whenever you see these types of fittings, that they match up and mate with one another. We're now going to use some hardware from MB Sturgis to help us make our connection here so we can tap in and have another line to run for our outside Quick Connect for our grill. Some of the things we're going to need is we're going to need a T. This is going to allow us to go in line with our existing hose here and then have a port to tap into. Well, you can see here that we've got no way to attach this T to this fitting here. So we are going to need a 3/8 adapter, and this is going to be a flared adapter. You can see it's flared on the inside, which ensures it's going to match up with the flared surface on here. Now this part here is not available here at eTrailer, but you can get it at your local hardware store. You can see it's a female end on each side with a flare that's designed to mate two male flares together. It's a 3/8 diameter. Now if you're purchasing all the parts here from eTrailer, and since this is not available, we do have hoses here in a short length that you can get and just use a short length of hose in place of an adapter like this. Now with these type of flare fittings, we don't need to use any kind of sealant with it. It's just a pressed fit. The tapered end will press into this and the soft metals will form to one another and seal up. So we're just going to thread this end on here. And then we can go ahead and tighten that down. Again, we're going to hold this side while we turn the nut. And you do want it to be pretty snug. We don't want any leaks to occur. So now that we've got this side attached, we can go ahead and take our T and thread it on one side. We'll also take, well, it's usually easier if we do the T first and tighten down one side, because we want to kind of choose the angle that this is going to be at when it's in the position we want. So we want it to angle off towards the center of our trailer, because there's a pre-existing hole right here, and we're going to use a 90-degree to send our hose out this hole towards the rear where we want our quick connect mounted. With your wrench, you want to put it on a couple of the flat spots on the fitting to keep it from changing out of the position we want it to be in, and then we can go ahead and use our other wrench to tighten this down. And if the other side comes loose, you just need to go back and just make sure you snug that up. It's just important we have all of our fittings nice and tight. So now we've got it nice and snug with the fitting facing the way we want it to. We can just come back on now and tighten up the hose that we had originally removed. So we've now got our T in line. T-fittings like this are really nice if you're going to add additional accessories, because you can just add them in line with your existing setup, and it's going to provide you with a port that you can tap onto to run other accessories. This is a 3-post flared 3/8 inch fitting, so it'll work with your pipe threads for a lot of your propane components using 3/8 flared fittings. We're going to be threading a 90-degree fitting on the end of our T now to help angle it towards the back. 90-degree fittings are really useful for certain tight areas where you need it to angle in order for it to fit, or if we've got a spot where it's real tight, we don't want to use a hose because it has a really sharp bend that we don't want to accidentally kink our hoses or causing any issues. 90 degrees work very well in those locations as well. It's all really mainly for getting things routed the way it needs to be routed, ensure that you don't have any kinks and cause any damage to your line. When we go to tighten this one down, we want it to angle towards our hole here. The way you want it to angle is going to vary depending on where you're routing your components to. So we're going to go ahead and just tighten this up, and I'm just going to kind of hold it so it doesn't turn too much while I'm tightening it, so it's angled in the correct location. So now we're all connected together. We've got our port that's going to go to our quick connect over there. It's angled directly into the pre-drilled hole in our trailer. If you don't already have any holes drilled in your frame, you really do need to drill holes in there. You don't want to run your propane lines down underneath, because debris could come up on the road and it could pinch, smash, or open up your line, which could result in a failure that you don't want to happen. So now we've got our hole here. We're going to go ahead and pass our hose through. We're using a 12-foot 3/8 flared fitting hose that's going to route back to where our quick connect is. You just want to make sure you choose the appropriate length for your setup that you're working with. So we can then just thread this right on, and then we'll snug that down as well. And whenever you're tightening them, you always want to hold them, because these brass fittings are softer, so that way when you tighten them down, they can seal to one another. And it's also made of a metal that doesn't cause sparks, because when you're using tools on here, if we had sparks occur when you're working with propane, you could potentially cause an ignition. So now we're just going to route this hose back towards our fitting, and we're going to secure it along the way using loom clamps. We've got a few different size loom clamps here at eTrailer, but some of your larger gauge hoses, you're going to need to pick up loom clamps at your local hardware store for those thicker hoses. You can get clamps up to 1/2 inch size here at eTrailer. When routing our propane line, we hit a cross member here that didn't have a hole in it. And again, it can't run underneath because then debris can come up and damage our hose. We want it to go through a hole. So we're just going to be drilling a hole through this on our Mantis here. Whatever trailer you might happen to be working on, you'll want to make sure you do the same to where it's not on bottom. For the size hose we're using here, we're going to be drilling out a 7/8 inch hole to pass our components through. Depending on the size of hose, you may need to adjust that for the particular size on your propane system. So now we've got this hole drilled out, I went ahead and took some gloss black spray paint to cover it up where I drilled to prevent any corrosion. We then passed our hose through and we just continue on routing it over towards our quick connect fitting. I'm going to drill out any holes that I need to on the way to ensure that I've got a good path to get there. So we've got our hose mounted over to our mounting point and everything. We now need to get this assembled. The quick connect fitting is just going to be just that by itself, and it's not going to attach to our hose. We are going to need some components to allow us to do so. So we're going to be using a 1/4 inch nipple here. This is going to thread into the back of our quick connect, and it's going to connect to the bulkhead. The threads that are SAE like this, where we do not have a tapered end, we want to make sure we're using thread sealant on those. We are not going to use thread sealant on any of the tapered ends. There's 2 different types that we have here. From JR Products, you can use a Teflon tape or you could use a thread sealant in a tube. I prefer the tube sealant. It is a little bit messier, but you just seem to be able to work a little bit easier and you get a better coverage with it. The thread tape is a little bit more cumbersome to use. Before we can assemble these though, we do need to get the bulkhead installed. That's where it's going to go next, and then last we've got our other fitting, which will connect to our hose here. But if you look here, this fitting, when we thread it in, the nut for the bulkhead won't pass by it. So we need to install the bulkhead first. So we're going to remove the nut off of it, as well as the star washer. We're just going to push this end through our bracket, place our washer on the other side, and then follow that up with the nut. We can then go ahead and tighten this down to secure it in place. And then we're just going to use our adjustable wrenches to tighten this down. So we're going to go ahead and show you how to use both options. We're going to be using the thread tape on the one with the flare fitting on one side and the SA on the other. We're not going to put anything on this side with the flare, but on this side where it goes into the bulkhead, we need to have sealant on it. When you're using thread tape, one of the things you need to keep in mind is that when you go to thread this in, you're wrapping the tape around it. Depending on how you wrap it on here, you're either going to make it wrap tighter around it as you thread it in, or it's actually going to unwind. So you just want to pay attention to that. So we're going to loosen up just a little bit here. It threads in clockwise. So we're going to take our tape and we're just going to wrap it around it like this, spinning it clockwise. And this will ensure that when we thread it in there, it's making our thread tape get tighter as we thread it in. We want to make sure we get it all the way around. Nice and snug. We can just rip the end off there. Make sure you don't block up the opening. I'm just poking my finger in there to make sure it's not blocked. Just take a small screwdriver or something to just clean that out. It's not as important that it's not blocking on this end, but it is very important that you don't get anything on the flared end. So now we can just take the end here and we're just going to thread it right into the bulkhead. And we can go ahead and use our adjustable wrenches once again to tighten it down. And we want to get this tightened down pretty far. We want to get our threads all the way up in there to ensure that we don't have any leaks. So now we're going to show you the liquid PTFE. We're going to be using Jamar's white stuff to seal this up. We're using our 1/4 inch nipple here. This has SAE threads on both sides, so we can thread it into our bulkhead and connect our quick connect to the other side. We're going to take the sealant here and we're only going to apply it to the male threads. And I've gone ahead and kind of squeezed the jar, kneaded it to help mix it up inside there before we get started. We want to make sure we get complete coverage all the way around. You can use a brush as well to apply this. I just like to kind of just gently squeeze it out of the tube onto the threads, making sure I get full coverage. And once we've got it on there, we can go ahead and thread it in. I'm just going to do this one side for now so I don't make a big old mess while I'm getting it thread into the bulkhead. We'll then take it and we're going to thread it into our bulkhead. And we're just going to make sure we've got that all the way tightened down. Once it's all the way tightened down, we can move on to snugging down the quick connect onto the other side, making sure we apply Jamar's white stuff to the other side as well. So I've gone ahead and applied some sealant to the other side as well. And now we're just going to thread our quick connect on there. And we'll get this tightened down. Now that we've got our quick connect fitting fully assembled and mounted in the bracket, we can take the hose that we had routed over and go ahead and connect it up and then snug it down. So now we just want to check to make sure we don't have any leaks. We're just spraying in the end to make sure that's not leaking. It shouldn't. It's all brand new, so everything looks good there. The more important part though is to check to make sure that any of the connections where we had screwed anything together, that we don't have any presence of bubbles. And what we're looking for is not these bubbles you see running down, but bubbles that are continually reoccurring because of the pressure escaping from our hose or fittings here, blowing those bubbles. We don't see any here, and we're just going to repeat this at each connection point where we had made any connections. And I did go ahead and turn on the propane at the front to make sure that there was pressure in the system to ensure that we can find any leaks. The chemical we're using here to check for leaks is just some soap inside of a spray bottle here, just a little bit of soapy water. You can see it makes plenty of good bubbles for us to make those leaks highly visible. So now that we've got everything installed, we've got checked and verified there's no leaks, I went ahead and plugged in our quick connect end into our quick connect here. I did turn the valve here so that way we've got gas flowing. That's going to go over to our grill, and then you're going to use the instructions for your grill. For ours, we have to push in to allow gas to come out and then turn it to hit the striker. And we can see that we've got flame now, we've got nice heat. We're ready to make some dinner for tonight. Now, of course, we're testing this inside, and you want to be doing this outside at home. We have a very large shop that has a ton of room in here, so it's not going to fill up with gas like it does very quickly inside of a small garage at home. So we're going to turn this off, and we're going to go ahead and pack up and get out there so we can enjoy our new propane quick connect. And that completes our installation of MB Sturgis's quick connect fitting on our 2020 Taxa Mantis.